let's just record the meeting. Great. Perfect. So if I just start quickly from the beginning, we're going to keep things simple today. So after a quick intro and a couple of announcements from my side, I'm going to let Verity take the floor and present what she has prepared for us. We've got some buffer time at the end of her session for questions. So if you want to use the Q&A box on the Zoom instead of the chat one, that would be actually amazing. So hopefully we'll be done by 1 so that you can get back to your second half of the day after lunch. So if I move quickly to the next slide, for those of you who are new to our community, who's like, this could be your first session maybe, we want to say welcome. We're excited to have you here and hope to see you in our future events, hopefully face-to-face sometime in the future too. Data Plus Women is a community and a meetup group for women who work in, with, or around data. So our aim is to promote and celebrate the achievements and success of women working in the industry and give them a platform to actually share their knowledge and share their experiences as well. So this means everybody is absolutely welcome. Like, we have male attendees and participants in our meetup groups as well. We only take women speakers, but other than that, everyone is welcome in our community. And with that, I want to introduce you to our London gang. So these are the co-leads of Data Plus Women London. I want to thank you for being here on behalf of everyone that you can see right now. And now we can move on to our announcements. So as some of you might know already, we have extended our virtual community to LinkedIn. This LinkedIn group represents all the Data Plus Women chapters globally. So it's not just London, but it's like overall. So it's an amazing opportunity to connect with like-minded women around the world. So we've created a code of conduct as well. So if you want to just check that and read it before you post anything, that would be really good. So we're looking forward to seeing your posts and comments on our LinkedIn group as well. The second announcement that we have is for everyone that found us on the meetup page. We've actually made the decision to retire that page. If you haven't already, please make sure you sign up to the official page on Splash, basically. And the next one is we're always looking for more speakers. Since it looks like we'll be having more virtual events for a while, it could actually be more flexible around the timing, around days, and around your needs as well. So if you haven't already applied, now could be a good time and we can get in touch right after. The next one is about our special event for Christmas. So we know that these are very interesting times, but we thought no one can say no to a little celebration. So as Data Plus Women chapters around Europe, we decided to gather together for a very special Christmas edition of Data Plus Women. So you can mark your calendars for December 1st, and then enjoy a little festive season for us, with us, sorry. And the last one actually is about our next event. So our November event is going to be about a very interesting subject as well. We're going to talk about the future of work. So Nan is going to talk about the workplace automation. And then Marvi will be joining us to talk about her research on parental leave policies. So with that, I actually want to move on to the reason why we're all here today. We're here to listen to Verity talk about the truth behind data. When we first read the title, actually, in our first meeting, like everyone just stopped for a moment to realize how important that sounded and how important it is for our lives. And I'm pretty sure that at the end of this talk, we'll all be taking something with us. So without further ado, Stage is yours, Verity.
Hi everyone, let me just share my screen and then you can all see my presentation. Okay. Okay, so while that's loading, I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for coming here today, for giving me your time and energy. So my name is Verity Brown. I am the founder of Tableau.org, and yes, over the next half an hour or so, we will be looking at the truth behind data. And like Tugba said, it was a really interesting topic that I'm very passionate about, and I will explain why in a moment. So basically, my background is a marketer. So that's what I've done for 12, 13 years now. So I've worked with data from that point of view. And then about 7 years ago, I had this idea where I wanted girls like me. I'm from a very poor area of the UK, who had aspirations but didn't know how to get to where they wanted to be, because they had no self-worth and there wasn't the infrastructure with where they lived. So I wanted to create a platform where they could be connected with women and men who were in the role that they wanted to be and could really understand how they got there and the true way. So that's how it started. And it was actually, I bought the URL, howdidyougetyourjob.com, and that's what it was 7 years ago. And then over that time, I just let that seed grow. And then in January 2020, it became the Authentic Data Revolution. So ultimately, the Authentic Data Revolution is an anonymous information platform. It starts with you as an individual answering 50 questions across all areas of life anonymously. And in turn, your reward for doing that is that you get to access the data of millions of people one day around the world. There's two reasons for this. The first reason, and I suppose the more trivial but still important reason, is because there's such a comparison culture that we have within the world at the minute, and it's damaging to our mental health and it's damaging to society in general. Basically, I wanted to do something about that, and instead of comparing our full 360 real life to the highlight real life of social media, I wanted people to actually see the reality of humans around them. So the point with the data is you can filter it down to about 3 or 4 things. So for example, if you wanted to look at women who are 24 living in London and working in marketing, and their situation in terms of sexuality, money, health, etc., you could do that. So it was really building a platform to get rid of that really dangerous comparison culture that we live in. But the bigger picture with it, the more real global identity and focus with it, is to create a platform where we can start to learn about humans that aren't like us. And this is why you may find it a bit strange that I've added here that I'm white, British and queer, but it's really important to me that I kind of put those things out there. Number one, I inform you I'm white and British. Yes, that might be a given, but I just want you to know that I am partly aware, never will be fully aware of the privilege that comes with that, and the status that that has. And I'm blessed that I've had people around me who've been able to teach me those things, who are from different backgrounds. But secondly, I say that I'm queer because even though I do have the privilege of being white and British, I do understand what it feels to be a minority and the challenges that come with that. So I will speak further into the talk about the importance of diversity in leadership and teams. But right now, I just want to be really open and honest with you about who I am. And then this quote is a quote that I have followed for the past few years. And the more I build Tableau, the more it becomes so absolutely key to what I'm trying to achieve. The 3 pillars of Tableau are authenticity, inclusivity and diversity. And I feel that this quote just brings all of that together. So that's really important for me. So in this presentation today, these are the 3 areas that we are going to look at. And I need to state right now, most of you probably know, I'm not a technical founder, I am a non-tech founder. So these are from a social point of view, and I'm really bringing in both my experience as a human being and my experience as a marketer. So the first area is the dark side of data. The second, why we really need to start paying attention to the hashtag do your own research. And the third is the lack of representation within market research. And then we can move into the Q&A. So let's have a look at this: publication bias and hand-picked data. Now, I recently read something that really sparked this topic for me and encouraged me to delve deeper. And it's quite scary how much publication bias and handpicked data happen. And I'm sure most of you are aware that it's constant and a real issue within the data world. So I want to look at antidepressant studies. I picked up a book called Lost Connections by Johann Hari, and within this book was a piece that really struck out to me as something super important to discuss today. So this is all about the research that drug companies conduct, and what they discovered is that 40% of these studies are never released. So they do the studies and we never see the data. Within this book, there was a doctor who started to delve a bit deeper into this. And a way of being able to see all the research done, because legally companies have to submit it, is by asking for a Freedom of Information request to the Food and Drug Administration. So this doctor requested one for the 6 most widely used antidepressants in the USA. And in particular, one that stood out was that one trial for Prozac, the drug was given to 245 patients, but the results were only given for 27 that were released into the public. And those 27 people were the ones that the drug worked for. So already you're manipulating data, you're handpicking what you want to release, which is a wildly dangerous thing to do when it comes to something as life-changing as antidepressants. So, you know, we've got here, they're doing the research, they're releasing only 40%. And then when they do release that 40%, it's really selective. It's not even the whole of the 40%. And, you know, in terms of seeing all the data, it is all about asking about these Freedom of Information Acts to the places that hold everything and that the data is trying to be hidden. So when the full data of those taking Prozac was compared to that of those on sugar pills, it was discovered that those taking antidepressants only felt marginally better. So that's known as about a 1.8 difference in points on the Hamilton score, which is how they look at these things. But the real drug, the Prozac, was also causing huge side effects that can add to depression, such as weight gain and sexual dysfunction. And as I said, the person who discovered this was a doctor, and this doctor had believed the studies that had been put in front of him for years and years and years, and had been prescribing patients on that basis. So it's really case studies like this that make us think, well, if a doctor, and when I say that, I mean someone with an education to a high level, someone with an analytical mind, someone who is more likely to look at all the options and see what his opinion is by looking at the data and the research, is being fooled by this, then what chance do the rest of us have? So that's a really important case study on handpicked data. The next point that I want to look at is selection bias. So this has been sparked by a documentary that is super powerful. I will talk about it in a moment, and I recommend you all watch it. And I want to look at the amending of the Voting Rights Act in the US of A. So the documentary that I am talking about is called All In, The Fight for Democracy, and it's available on Amazon Prime. So let's go over it in summary. In 1965, there was the Voting Rights Act, and it was implemented, and it basically prevented and protect Americans from racial discrimination when it came to voting. And this really was sparked by the acts of violence in Selma in that same year. So that's been working and sworn in with each president since 1965. In 2013, the Supreme Court invalidated key parts of the Voting Rights Act, and it gave 9 states, mostly in the South, i.e. mostly Black and poor populations, to change their election laws without advance federal approval. This meant that states could then manipulate the voting laws to how they wanted them to be, to make sure that the people that they wanted in power got into power. This led to voter suppression. And the way this led to voter suppression was many different tactics that they used. Some of these were things like voter ID laws. So for example, you had to have a government assessed and qualified form of ID to be able to vote. Lots of poor people, lots of people of colour, lots of Native Americans did not have these form of IDs and did not even have the things they needed to gain the form of IDs. And so that meant that we were losing the votes of those people that were as equally important as everyone else within that state. There were things like changing voting boundaries so they could manipulate the populations within those states a bit more. They closed polling stations. So instead of having to walk a mile to vote, someone had to walk 10 miles. They made it harder to vote in terms of reducing the number of staff and computers and things like that. There was a thing called purging, which they said that if you hadn't voted for a number of years, you would just be struck off the register and you wouldn't be told. A really great example of purging is in Ohio, where 2 million people were purged, and that's out of a population of 12 million. But the worrying thing about this was 400,000 were purged in error. So we're constantly losing all of these people's rights. And unfortunately, yes, it's the minorities, it's the poor, it's the young that are affected by these types of schemes, by this type of manipulation. And it has been proven that the US is the weakest democracy within the developed world. And it's because of things like this. This is why. And the problem is with this is it becomes a selection bias because you're not getting a true voting basis of the entire country. It's becoming selected. It's becoming very white. It's becoming very middle class. It's becoming people with money, people with access, people with able bodies. And that's when it becomes a problem, because then decisions are being made without it representing the entire country. So the second point I wanted to talk about in this presentation is the hashtag do your own research. Now, there was a Forbes article and it opens up with the line, research both sides and make up your own mind. It's simple, straightforward, and common sense advice. Now, when I first came across this hashtag, I read it completely wrong. I thought do your own research meant, you know, be empowered. Like if you see something, you're not sure if it's right, you know, fake news, etc., then look a bit into it, like really try to understand it and do your own research around that subject. However, now I've delved into it, it really is quite a dangerous hashtag. So the probably most prominent place that I found this hashtag was in an article by Sarah Wilson in The Guardian. which was named "The Wellness Realm Has Fallen into Conspiritualism, and I Have a Sense Why." And I'll let you read the quote yourself on the screen. But this is all about, not about rational research, but it's become like a dangerous tactic and incredibly disempowering, because it basically indicates that there's no trust, and we don't know what the truth is or where to find the truth. And I think, like the quote states, she asked someone, how do you know that vaccines are a deep state plot to wipe out white people? And they replied with, how do you not know? And whatever side you're on, this isn't about right or wrong in this presentation. This is about really looking at things with an analytical mind. But this is about, well, we live by rational argument, we live by facts, we live by truth and trusting those truths. And the thing is, we seem to be losing that. And the number of podcasts and YouTube videos that I've watched and listened to leading up to this presentation, where experts in their own field have said themselves, I don't know where to look anymore for the truth. It's a really, really worrying state to be. And there's probably a big reason why we are in this state. And I'm sure you've all watched it. If you haven't, please make sure this is one thing that you do tonight or tomorrow. The Social Dilemma, Netflix documentary. It's basically where tech experts sound the alarm on the dangerous human impact of social networking. And I think ultimately it's kind of the reason why I'm doing Tugba. It's really, really key in those, I suppose, outside the world of data engineering, computer science, etc., to really understand how social media platforms work and how much power that they have over the individual. So it's really knowing about the algorithms. And the reason this ties very closely to do your own research is a personal example that I want to bring into this. I have friends who have opinions that differ from mine in terms of COVID, in terms of politics, etc. And to a point, that's fine. You have to make your own boundaries as to, how you manage these things within true friendships. However, when we've tried to have conversations about these things, there has been a lack of depth and context with the discussion on both sides. When Brexit happened within the UK, I found it hard myself as what I'd like to think as a smart woman to do my own research and really find out the truth. And I'm sure you all know what that feels like. And so the thing about the social dilemma is what it's teaching us is, say, for example, they know that you are anti-vaccine because that's what you're typing in, because that's what you're reposting, because that's what you're commenting on. Your feed will then become a feed of anti-vaccine material. And so this is the concern now, that people, including myself, are thinking, well, what is my true opinion? What do I actually think? And what part of me has been brainwashed to a certain extent to believe something? And this, coming back to the data, is where we're in a dangerous place with this hashtag, because there doesn't really seem to be safe places to go in a mass market sense. And this is something that I'm passionate about. This isn't about people necessarily with an education, with the accessibility to, wider networks where we can really start to hear people's different opinions from different backgrounds, who are of different race, etc. But this is about more working class, more lower socioeconomic people who are just in this bubble of their own news feeds. And so when someone now comes to me with differing opinion, I have to think, how much of that is it because they unknowingly have just been given so much information regarding that subject that has been algorithms and just fed to them because of the data that they've then given to the social media platform. So it's it's a really important hashtag that I would like you to go away and think about. I do feel that the fear of totalitarianism fuels this volatile hashtag, and yeah, we have to be really, really careful and aware of that. So I now want to move on to my third point. So this is all about a lack of diversity in market research agency panels. So it may seem a little bit niche, but actually it's super important. And the more driving factor behind this is the lack of desire for diversity from the clients of the market research agency panels. So the reason this is a really important thing for me is because when I set up Tugba, it was basically for the individual, by the individual. As an individual, you went on and you answered 50 questions anonymously, and then you got to access all this data for yourself of other people around the world anonymously. Then I thought, okay, well, this needs to become a business. What is the business model? And the only thing that seemed viable, one was kind of a Wikipedia style donation element, which many people told me not to bother with. So that was out the window quite quick. The other was kind of an advertisement partnership element. But then the more I worked on Tugba, the more I learned about the algorithms of social media, etc., the more I thought, well, I'm just joining that gang, really. I'm just going to be pumping adverts at people and using the data against them. And that is the complete opposite of what Tugba is all about. So then I had to think, okay, well, where does the money come from to be able to fund something like this? And that's when I started to consider the B2B channel, which would be asking if people would like to be generously rewarded to then answer questions on behalf of organisations with many, many strict ethical practices put in place. And I thought, right, a little bit of competitor research, which is what I do as a marketer. And I was shocked at what I found. I actually was offered some free support from a big organisation who conducted this research on my behalf. So I'm quite proud of the depth that it goes into. But these are the things that I wanted to highlight. So in the UK, there's over 5,000 market research organisations. So this is from the FAME database that holds UK companies. And not one of them mentions LGBTQ plus in its formal activity statement. And a single company mentions diversity. This is nearly 6,000 companies, and this doesn't really seem to be a thing for them. So basically, what this adds up to is a reliable observation that even if they do define LGBTQ plus segment in their audience panels, and that the people who conducted the research for me missed it, market agencies just don't promote this capability, which means that there's organizations out there who aren't looking for that capability. Then I asked about race, and I said, okay, well, you know, how important is race and ethnic minorities to both organizations and to the market research agencies? And I was informed that 77 out of 300 ask about race within their questionnaire. So when you join a market research panel, they will ask you about your race. And again, it just floored me. I thought, well, how can market research agencies offer a really strong service when they aren't being able to say, you know, this is the number of people that we have of you know, different, you know, ethnic minorities. And then I looked into the 2011 census, and 80% of people were white British. That's how they labelled themselves, as white British in the 2011 census. which means that 20% aren't, 20% are ethnic minorities. So this is a huge, huge part of the UK population, and it doesn't really seem to be a thing that's being asked for when it comes to market research. And then I looked into sexuality, and the question of sexuality isn't even asked on the census. So that was a bit of a shocker for me to realise that. There is a report from 2015, and it says that 2.5% of the population describe themselves as LGBTQ+. However, being a queer woman myself, I'm pretty certain that that is a false percentage. And there is actually a Stonewall report where they advise the government that they think it's much more nearer to 5 to 7%. So again, we've got this, you know, and these are just the two things that I've chosen to look at. I've not looked at things like, you know, disability or income or anything like that, but I've just chosen to look at these two things as examples. So now we basically have, you know, two really important parts of people, of individuals that aren't really being looked at by market research agencies as things that are worth mentioning in their about us elements. And then it made me think, well, is this because organizations aren't asking for this? Is it because organizations just assume that the data they get back is diverse and representative of the population? And I suppose to make it clear when I talk about this, this isn't really about the fact that you can go to a market research agency and say, I want to do some market research and I only want to ask gay people because that is my organization. I you know, I'm a gay magazine and that's who I want to ask. This isn't about that. This is about an organization who serves every human equally, and that they aren't bothered that the information, the data that they are getting is representative of the population that they are serving. And so that became a really big thing for me. And so this is why from 2021, Tugba is going to be starting to look at working within market research and basically making sure that there is an agency out there where that the people being asked is representative of the population fully, completely. And in terms of any and all minorities, and that breaks down into so many little things. And that means a lot of hard work and it means a lot of effort. And it's worth it because this is what we deserve as humans, to be equal, to be worthy. But I feel like it's just not on people's agenda at the minute. So that's been a really big thing in terms of looking at the data around market research agencies. And I think just to kind of summarize why this is so needed, I don't know if you remember 2017, Kendall Jenner did a wildly controversial advert with Pepsi, where she was trying to broker peace between protesters and cops with a can of soda. And Pepsi had to pull it within 24 hours because it was downright offensive, really. And that to me is like one of the biggest examples of when you either don't conduct research or you conduct research with a panel that do not represent the population effectively, you come into real problems with the content that you put out. So that is kind of a real whiz through tour of the three things that I said we were going to talk about today. So we looked at the dark side of data. We looked at why we need to pay attention to do your own research, and we looked at the lack of representation within market research. And I just kind of wanted to go through what are the key learning points for me today and hopefully for you. I do believe that accurate and honest data has now become a privilege, and that's a scary place to be. So we all need to, as women and men and people interested in data, try and take steps every day to try and get us back to a place where accurate and honest data is just the norm, because we have really lost that. And I do strongly believe, and I think this has been represented throughout the presentation, that diverse leaders and diverse teams are the only true way to gain true diversity. And this is really, really key for me in building Tugba. Like I say, I'm a British white queer woman, and I need my team to not be like me, to not look like me, to not speak like me, because otherwise I cannot build a global organization that represents people from around the world. And lastly, you know, not all is as it seems. And unfortunately, we're in an age where information is confusing. And anyone who listened to, you know, the government last night when they were announcing new measures, we're in a world where facts are just baffling and no one really knows what to believe or what is right, what is wrong. And so we need to do everything we can within ourselves to educate ourselves, and to also try and not judge those who don't have opinions that align with us, and to try and understand, well, why do those people not have those opinions? Because I do believe, unfortunately, for some people, it's not necessarily themselves, it's the content they're being fed through their screen time. And so to be better humans, I suppose we need to have that bit more whole vision of what's happening around us, and try and help each other out, really. So just before we go to the Q&A, I just want to pop a few things out there. Come and join me. I am the only person working on Tugba at the minute. I want this to grow into a beautiful global organisation that does good in the world of data. My motto is kind of, I want to put the human before data again, rather than it being a currency where the human is used. And I would love a tech co-founder to come on board. So if anyone out there thinks, yep, sounds great, or even if you just think it would be lovely to have a virtual coffee, then reach out. I am also going to start something called the Voice of Tugba. What this will be is representatives from every country in the world, and within that will be broken down into minorities into many different areas. So with every big thing that happens with Tugba, they will basically be my kind of panel that I go to make sure that everything is, you know, processed in the right way, and approved by everyone, and done correctly. So that's a really, really important next step for me. So yeah, let me know if you yourself or you know anyone who would be interested in that. And then please complete the questions. So Tugba.org, there are 50 questions. Please, it would be great if you could complete them, and then if you could share them with friends, family, social, etc. And then yeah, we can kind of get this revolution growing. So that's all my details there. Message me on Instagram, email me, like, please, the door is completely wide open. Virtual coffees are essential when I'm working at home on my own. So I would love to hear from you, whatever feedback you have. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. I will hand back over to the guys at Tableau.
Hi again, thank you for the amazing presentation, Verity. I learned a lot and definitely had a few points that I'm gonna take with me. And I definitely agree on your remark of being more diverse. So you mentioned that you need to hire people that doesn't like you, doesn't look like you, not like you. And also coming from different backgrounds. Also, you mentioned social dilemma. I mean, I haven't watched it myself, but there was a comment from one of the co-leads that said, yes, we have a certain amount of representation of human and data in there, but we still need representation from other diverse companies building these content, because we need to target different audiences. We need to make them feel welcome as well. So thank you again. And we have actually a couple questions on the Q&A. So I'd like to ask you the first one, if that's okay. Perfect. So this is coming from Heidi. She's actually the Data Plus Women Germany leader. So she's asking, what responsibility do we as internet users have to question everything we see? Is there an easy way to vet online sources?
So I suppose the short answer is no, there isn't an easy way. It's I think the biggest thing that I've learned through building Tugba is first of all to have your foundational channels that you do trust, and this is going to be doing a bit of research. It's going to be looking at, do those channels have any sort of political affiliation? You know, who funds them? Is it government funded? Is it funded by some sort of billionaire in another country? You know, really start to understand the places that you get your information, and also make sure that you have quite a few diverse different channels that you use. I kind of caught myself the other day that every single article that I referred to nearly was from The Guardian. Now, yeah, The Guardian is a source of media that I trust, but that doesn't really make me a good leader or a good general all-round person to just gain my information from one source. So it's really trying to you know, expand the types of you know, media channels that you gain your information from. It's tough and it's tricky, and I knew this question would come up, and I did try to have a more cohesive answer for it, but it's just hard at the minute. There's a really great example of during the Scottish election, a self-made billionaire actually funded a fact-checking program, and within 24 hours it was closed down because the scientists working on the program just couldn't figure out what were facts and what wasn't. So I think it really is just trying to, rather than read a piece of information and quickly share it, just really start to sit with information and try and understand, like, what is the source, who funds that, and then we're not kind of sharing news and media that may be false.
Thank you for that. I hope that answers your question, Heidi. And the second question that we have is coming from Anna, and she asks, how do you approach engaging in a more rational and in-depth conversation with people who are in a disinformation bubble?
Well, I think the worst thing to do is to attack. So, and I've done this myself in the past before I kind of educated myself on dealing with this type of subject. I think, like I said during the presentation, it's really been brought to my attention that, you know, these people I really care about, or even people you don't know, maybe have a opinion because of the stuff that they're being fed because of the algorithms. And so it may not be a true opinion. And the problem is then we don't know, it all becomes all a bit confusing. I think the best way to approach something like this is to ask them if they've watched something like The Social Dilemma, where they can really understand how social media works, and they can really understand, oh, well, you know, maybe if everything that I base my opinion on is from Facebook, for instance, because they don't read a newspaper, or you know, they don't watch the news on TV or whatever, then maybe I need to start, you know, looking elsewhere to kind of gain that information, or maybe start looking at where the articles come from when I look at it. And I think it's like holding that space for that person to kind of explore that as well. I think the difficulty is, you know, ultimately when it comes to opinion, there's no right or wrong. That's why it's an opinion. But then it's when we come down to the more science and fact that we have a bit more of a black and white vision. The problem with that is now that's all being put into question, especially with COVID. And this is where there just seems a real loss of control on information culture. So I think if you have a friend who has a very different opinion from you, and one that you really truly believe that is maybe quite a dangerous opinion, then I think it's empowering her or him to, you know, really explore where her news and information comes from, just so she's better informed herself and can, you know, make more kind of rounded decisions about the things that matter.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we do have one more in the Q&A box. This is coming from Eva Murray, and she's asking, how do you strike a balance between asking for more specific diversity-focused details in a questionnaire or similar, and making people feel uncomfortable that by answering this question, they might catapult themselves out of the process? For example, out of a job application or speaker application, because they worry that people will be biased.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's horrible that this is even a question to be asked. You know, I wish we didn't live in a world where that is a question that we need to consider, but we do, don't we? So, and I suppose that's a little bit difficult for me to answer as a white British woman, because I personally have never had to hide those facts myself on anything that I've applied for. However, I do co-host a podcast, and my co-host is Black, and we have spoke about this before. And it is ultimately out of your control. If you stand up and say, for instance, I am a Black woman and I'm applying for this job, and the person who is looking at the application form isn't someone who is as considerate and open to all humans being equal, then you can put, you know, kind of put yourself in a weaker position for that job. And that has got nothing to do with, you know, your skill or your knowledge or your ability at that job role. If I'm really honest, I don't feel like I'm qualified to answer this question correctly and give it justice. But I just want to say that I understand what a challenge it is, and if you reach out to me personally, I think I would like to go away and have a look at how to build a more accurate answer to this and come back to you if that's okay.
I'm sure it's okay. Thank you for your comments. And the last one is coming from Mathilde. Hopefully I pronounced your name right. Which resources or checklists could we send to people that do not work with data and to raise their critical sense?
Well, again, it's been difficult for me when I've been pulling together this presentation. Like I said during it, reading blogs, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, and hearing experts and scientists and doctors saying they themselves are struggling in this kind of age of information and fake news. What I will do, I think, is I will see if I can find some sort of checklist. I have a look myself, because again, I thought it would be a question that would be asked. But I will try and find that, and I will share with the co-leaders, and they can then share with the group, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. We can always send a follow-up email after the session. So we're going to be including your resources and all the comments in there as well. So I think that brings us to the very end of this Native Plus Women. Sorry, for some reason this is not going for screen. Okay, I think that should be fine for a minute. So basically, like I said, we can share all the resources that you've mentioned also within your presentation and afterwards in a follow-up email from us. What I wanted to just say to wrap up is like the announcement, I just want to remind everyone to just join us for our November event, where we'll be talking the future of work, the automation in the workplace, and also the parental leave. I want to thank you, Verity, for taking the time to be with us today and introduce us to DAR. And thank you everyone for being here and all the questions, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day. Okay, bye.
Great job. It was really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tugba, just a reminder to stop the recording as well.
Yes, I'm doing that now.